I would like to proceed now with the analysis of our environment, which means that's chapter 3 that we are entering right now. And if we should take a closer, I'll just go back to one of the slides and say, right here, that means it's this one we're concentrating at right now. So the next the next hour, I'll be talking about this environment and the tools that we use to make this analysis in order to be able to develop strategies based on the environment that we can choose from in order to implement and hopefully have a success in the marketplace. Good. So how do we analyze our strategic environment? Well, according to Lynch, we have these basic tools here in order to analyze the environment that we are entering. And please again remember that we have different environments. We'll go through these one by one. I'll not spend a lot of time on here customer analysis and competitor analysis and 4 links. I'll not spend a lot of time on that one, but if any of you have any specific requests or questions, please feel free to contact me. I guess you all have my mail or something. But I'll try to work a little bit more with especially environment basics. We'll dig a little bit more into PESTEL analysis, industry life cycles, key factors, and 5 forces. These are the ones that I'll focus mostly about. So getting a start on, you can see here, and I just mentioned down here that table 3.1 on page 71, that is in the latest edition, is quite essential, and present this overview as well. So if you are going, if at the exam, for example, that I'm asking questions about, do some kind of external analysis, blah, 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 then you will have the overview right here. And in that table, you will also find some good input to what to do. Okay, but for now, we will move on to the first step, which is the market, the general market evaluation. And as you can see, it consists of market size, growth, and market share. I know I mentioned that just before when we started about size and growth, maybe in a market not growing. But if we look at this one here, market size and market growth and market share, these actually depends on this one called market definition. Means what products, what services do we include when we are kind of defining the market that we are operating in. And I would like to use a little example to illustrate this. So I'm going to this as next slide. We'll go back to the one before. But Vestas, you may not all know Vestas, but Vestas is the world leading producer of wind turbines with a headquarter in Aarhus. Some of you may or will probably end up getting a job there. But when you produce wind turbines, then a company like Vestas, they will have to ask themselves, do they operate in a market for wind turbines, as you can see here, number 1? Do they operate in a market for renewable energy? Or maybe the third one, do they operate in the market for energy? Now, they have to discuss this, because when they talk about, imagine you are together with the CEO and all the other larger leaders in investors, and you talk about how do we define our market. Then if they decide that they are in the market for wind turbines, and they start to make strategies based on that, and they start to make analysis of the environment, then the way they think and the way they analyze the environment will be affected by the pure idea that the way they define the market is wind turbines. So what kind of competitors will they look for? Well, they will look for other companies producing wind turbines. That also means that they will probably not be looking for other companies producing other kinds of renewable energy, because they are not within the definition of what they do. So that means that if they make kind of a narrow definition of the market, like wind turbines, they might not have their attention to renewable energy. They may not have the attention directed to energy production in general. So the way you define your market as a company, whether it's being quite narrow or very broad, that actually make a great difference to, for example, when we look at this one, how is the market size? Because how's the market size we look at wind turbines compared to renewable energy? Well, wind turbines is clearly part of renewable energy. So over here we have more production, more companies, more customers. So renewable energy, the market for renewable energy is quite larger than wind turbines. And what about the market for energy? Well, that's even larger yet than renewable energy. So the market size, you could say, is little, a little bit more than little, and huge here at energy. So if we are Vestas and we are in the marketing department and we are trying to figure out, for example, our market share, how is our market share if we define our market as wind turbines? Well, it's pretty huge. But what if we decide to say our market definition is the market for energy? Then our market share is quite small. So depending on this market definition has a huge impact on how do we calculate the market and the size of the market. It also has a great impact on how we look at the market and the growth in this particular market, and especially our market share. So as a company, it's very important that we narrow down or broaden our strategic outlook, because that helps us to figure out here, what do we focus at? And it's pretty simple, I guess, because if you can understand something and you can imagine something, you also start to focus at it. But if you cannot imagine, and if you are not thinking of, for example, energy as the market you are operating in, then you don't see it. So mentality, vision, etc., these kinds of words, and the way we see ourselves in the environment is quite important for what we see, because you cannot see something that you're not looking for. But if you know you're going to look for it, you certainly will see it if you see it. I hope that makes sense, but it's a little bit about, you could say, it's about constructivism and that area. Okay, so going back to this, the first general evaluation is about the market size, growth, and market share. Pretty important issue about market definition. I hope that is pretty clear to you. And that's why this example with Vestas is important. Now, the next step, and I'll just show you this slide again here. As you can see, step 1 was general evaluation. Step 2, the degree of turbulence, is what we are talking about right now. Oops, this one. Degree of turbulence. It has to do with the market that we are operating in. And turbulence is building upon changeability and predictability. And also, it is important for you to understand that it builds upon all the other external factors. And the reason that it's taken in as step number 2 is that when you start working in a company, you will constantly get information about your marketplace and about what's going on. So that means that you are building knowledge about the environment. You're building knowledge about the changes that takes place in the environment. And getting more and more experienced, you will be able to, on a continuous basis, understand the changeability of the market and the predictability. That means the idea that you can actually kind of predict what is going on. So the turbulence level depends on how fast the environment is changing and whether we can predict it. Just a little example. If we have a market that is, or an environment that is really changing a lot, constantly, then if we combine that change in the environment with predictability, saying that we cannot really predict anything, that is kind of a pretty tough situation, because everything is changing and we can't predict it. And that's quite a different situation from, okay, everything might be changing, but if we are able to predict everything that's going to happen, then we can take proper actions. Then it doesn't matter that things are changing, because we can still predict in what direction and what values they might have in the future. So when we have the turbulence level here high, that would be high change in the environment and unable to predict. And that means if we have a very high turbulence level, then we go down here, and Lynch would say that emergent processes would be more suitable. And if we think back, emergent processes was when we might actually develop and implement strategies when we go along with the analysis. So we are not waiting, because we simply cannot wait if the turbulence level is high. So remember, turbulence level depends on everything else. Then the next step, PESTEL. These are factors that we find in our environment. Now, just for a moment, imagine that you are finding yourself in a company, and you have went indoor, and you are inside, and you're looking out the windows. Now, what can you see outside? Well, you might be able to see a competitor across the street. You might be able to see a supplier just coming in to your company, and it's ready to unload whatever you need. So there are lots of things that you can actually see just by looking out. You might also see customers, etc. But when we are talking about PESTEL factors, we are talking about what we call macro factors. And those we call PESTEL. These are factors, and as you can see here, influencing all industries. We cannot influence them. And it's also quite hard to see them. You cannot see them just by looking outside your window. So these are very overall factors. And for example, we have political factors. World Trade Organization, for example. We can have political factors in our specific country. We have economic factors. And please remember, it is not economic circumstances in the company. It's the economic factors in a country. For example, negative growth in Denmark. We have gross domestic product. We might have interest rates. So again, things you as a private person and a company, you have no influence on the general interest rate in a company or in a society. Then we have sociological issues. Same thing. It's about the whole nation in this case. Technological things, Internet of Things, robotics, environmental issues, climate, legal things, laws. What are the specific laws right now? And the difference between legal and political is that when the political system works with legislation, they might still be able to change something, but in the moment that the political system decides something and it becomes into a law, it becomes a legal factor. That means entering a new market, are there any legal issues we need to take care of? So PESTEL here is not really an analysis, but it consists of lots of analysis and is simply a useful checklist. Now let's try to look at this one. If we do a PESTEL for a state or a country, or we can do a PESTEL for a state, a country, a region. If we go down here, we could have Denmark, Germany, and different countries down here. And then you can choose specific political factors that we find important for our specific business in this particular situation. We'll have to choose specific economic conditions, factors that we would need to look at. That is important for us to look at. And now, just go back a minute and say, why is it important to identify specific political, economic situations or factors, sociological factors? Well, it all has to do with the environmental analysis. Because why is it we're doing this? Well, we do this in order to identify opportunities and threats in Denmark from the political system. We do it in order to identify opportunities and threats in Denmark about economic circumstances, and so forth. And then we have to do the same thing with Germany. And the same thing, opportunities, threats with the political issues. And if we had another country as well, we would simply continue. So that means we gain knowledge, we identify O's and T's, and we compare, evaluate against each other. And we can do that for Europe, North America. So we can choose state, country, region. Okay. The next one, step 4, growth and life cycle analysis. And then we'll have a break, I promise. Theory suggests that businesses or industries go through various phases of development over time, and strategies will change within each phase. Now, let's do something else here. Let me try to say that we go down here and say we have weeks, months, or years. That could be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or it could be months that we are illustrating. Basically, we are illustrating time down here. So that's important, because when we look at the industry life cycle, we do look at when do we have a market. And please look up here, market sales. It's not company sales, but it's market sales. And when the first company starts to sell a specific product in a specific market, we have sold one, and the sales might be, let's say, $10, whatever. But then when that one company is starting to sell more and more, maybe the sales to the market will go up, and then suddenly maybe another company is entering that particular industry as well. So now they are 2, and more companies might enter, more and more people would like to buy, and more companies are offering their products. So the market sales goes like this. Then in this phase, it's then growing. We are not introducing it to the market anymore. People start to know it. And now people are really starting to demand this product. And therefore the market is growing tremendously. And then theory says that, okay, we might then also enter a phase of maturity, which is where the growth takes off, and we might hit some kind of a peak. And then eventually, maybe the market may start saying, okay, we really don't want this product anymore, and it might decline, and we could continue, and it might die. So there are 2 issues here to understand industry life cycle: time and market sales. And it's so important that you understand that introduction, growth, maturity, and decline are different phases. So today, landlines would probably be over here and dead in most countries. And cell phones might be about here in general, and smartphones might be around here. So what does it take to get an introduction again? Well, we have to have a complete new technology that could take the whole industry back to the introduction phase and make them go this way. Just before the break, we have this one. So that means that we have different conditions for different market phases. Means I, G, M, D, that's introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. So some of the indicators for having an introduction is high growth potential, limited or no regulation, no direct competition, rivalry among players, low in the introduction, and we might have an innovative focus from a strategic point of view in the introduction. But what is important is if you are asked to do an industry analysis based on this industry life cycle, and you are told that, okay, the business is wind turbines, for example, then you will have to evaluate what kind of market phase here do wind turbines find themselves in. Let's just for the example say that we are in the growth phase. That means that the whole industry is in the growth phase. So even though that you yourself decide to make a new company who is producing wind turbines, if you're producing wind turbines that is more or less like the ones produced today, then you as a company, you enter the market where the market is in the growth phase. And therefore it's important to understand that even though you start a new company, the new company do not find themselves in the introduction. They find themselves in maybe introduction, but more likely in the growth or the maturity phase. And depending on which phase the market is in, you will, as a new company, face this, this, and this. Or if it is in maturity, this, this, and this. So that's an important point for you to remember. And we got to this step 5, factors specific to the industry, also called key factors for success. The key factors for success, the idea about it is that in any industry, there will always be some factors that are more important than others. And I think it's really helpful to take a look at an example here. If we look at here the global soda industry, so producers of soda pops of any kind, but not on a national basis, but on a global basis. If we look at that, then we could see that what is it that the customers here, what is it that customers want from a global brand? Well, they want availability. So if we look at that, they want availability. What does that mean to a company that customers want availability of their product? Well, it means that if the company do not have access to distribution channels, then we are pretty sure that this company is never going to be a global soda brand. So access to distribution channels is for the global soda industry a KFS, a key factor for success. That means if you as a company want to be a global brand within the soda industry and you do not have access to the distribution channel, then you can forget to become the market leader within that industry. So a key factor for success in this case would be access to distribution channels. Okay, so another example over here, the corporation, our own company. If we want to be a global brand within the soda industry, then we need to have branding competences. We need to have production facilities. So other key factors for success in order for us to become the market leader within an industry is that we have branding competences and we have production facilities. So that means we need to take a closer look at our resources and figure out what are they and how can they support us being a global brand. And the same goes for competitors and the competitive situation. I have made a little question mark here, so you can try to figure out yourself what that could be and find a key factor for success based on investigation of competition. Now, these three areas here is also called OMA's 3Cs model, that if we want to investigate and find key factors for success, we look at customers, competitors, and our own corporation. Now, you may also kind of see it in the way that if you have and live up to the key factors for success, if you can, as a company, say, yes, we do have the ability to meet these key factors for success, then this is your access ticket into the industry of becoming and becoming a market leader. So it also means that down here, you can have a fine business without the KFSs taken care of, but you will never become the market leader within an industry, saying having 3 or 4 specific key factors for success. So it's not necessarily necessary that you have taken care of key factors for success. But if you want to become the leader within that industry, you certainly need to investigate what are the key factors for success and then make sure that you can take care of it. So that's also why it says here that it's very useful to identify key factors for success because they will help us to set the strategy. And now we have to remember that strategy is a route for the future, figuring out where do we want to go. And therefore also it's useful to understand these because we have many different kinds of strategic ways, and therefore key factors for success can help us select the specific way that make a success for our specific company. So key factors for success: investigation of cooperation, competition, and customers with the intention to figure out what is it that make a success out of a company in this specific industry, and are we capable of taking care of these key factors for success, or can we develop ourselves in a direction so that we can take care of those key factors for success. Good. Then we will take a closer look at step 6, factors specific to competition. That's what we call the Porter's 5 forces analysis. The idea here is that we have an economic power in the marketplace. And this economic power is also connected to the bargaining power that we see down here. So Michael Porter's basic idea was that when he investigated the American industry, he figured out that, okay, there are certain powers in place here and in play in any industry. And of course, one of the things is that we have number 1 here called industry competitors. Means those of your larger competitors and basically all your competitors, because there's a difference between having a oligopoly or monopoly or whatever. So the industry and the number of competitors, the size of the competitors, of course, tell us something about what kind of power do my company have if there's only, let's say, one other company who's producing and selling products in this particular marketplace. will that be different if I am a very big producer and there might be 50 small producers? Is that a different situation? Yes, of course it is. So the industry and the type of competitors that we find in the industry has an impact on how here the bargaining power is from the other companies within the industry. And that can tell us something about how attractive the industry is. Okay, and another thing that he found out was that customers are of course important. We need to understand customers. But Porter's research also showed that customers can have more or less power when they bargain. You probably know the expression that you can vote with your feet. Means that if you don't like something, you can simply walk away. And if you do not like a product, you can simply stop buying it. So, of course, customers have, in the end, always some kind of power, because they can kind of say, we don't want to buy this. Unless, of course, that you are the only supplier in the marketplace. Then they have to buy from you. But then you have a monopoly, and that's a very specific situation. So customers, if they're very large, then they might be able to dictate more or less the buying terms. And then you simply have to kind of obey to that, because if you do not do it, then the customers will buy from another supplier. Then he also found that the suppliers might be in a position where they may have quite a huge power over you as a customer. Because if your suppliers possess, for example, a unique ingredient, then it can be difficult to buy that ingredient in other places. And therefore, you have to use that supplier. Or there may also be situations where the suppliers are quite few. And then, of course, it makes it more powerful to be the supplier if there's not a lot of suppliers. The fourth thing is about substitutes. If you sell a product and you have this industry where you have your other competitors producing, selling the same type of product, then there might also be substitutes to what you are producing. So it's very basic, you could say, is that if you want to go from A to B, from Aarhus, where the university is, and you want to go to Copenhagen, you can choose to fly, or you can take the train. But if you are in the industry of flying and offering flight to customers, then you might say that the substitute to that would be train. Of course, if you have defined your industry as transportation, personal transportation, then plane and train will be in the same industry. Then a substitute might be that you walk yourself or buying a bike. So substitutes is about investigating what kind of pressure do we have from different sides that can pose a threat to our specific company and the products we are producing. So number 5, potential new entrants. Are there any companies in our environment that might simply just enter our industry here? And then maybe they will not have any experience, but they may simply just have enough money, and they might be looking into new potential expanding industries. And we may have lots of companies earning a lot of money, and they can simply buy themselves into industries by setting up new investments or buying, for example, competitors, and then bring new competences in. So it is important to understand that we may be facing new entrants into an industry. And what does that do to then the technology that we use in order to produce our products? And will it change the whole industry? Because those guys who's entering the industry maybe also today is producing substitute products. So now they not only produce substitute products, they also produce the same as the industry itself. So evaluation of potential new entrants is also quite important. This leads us to talk about attractiveness of the industry. So all of this up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tell us something about the attractiveness of the industry. It also tells us something about the entry and exit barriers. For example, an entry barrier. What kind of barriers might we find to enter a specific industry? Well, key factors for success is also quite important to look at here, because they can tell us something about the barriers that we might find in order to enter a specific industry. And exit barriers, if an industry have, let's say, long-term contracts, etc., then it might be quite difficult for them to go out from that industry again. And therefore we have exit barriers that might be high or low. And if we take a closer look at some of these issues, if we try to look down here and talk about attractiveness, what we can see here with the yellow color, if we have high exit barriers and at the same time we have high entry barriers, what does that tell us about that industry? Well, you could turn it around a bit and say, okay, if it is pretty difficult to get in, which is basically what it means that we have high entry barriers, and at the same time we have quite high exit barriers, what does that tell us about the profit? Well, probably because it's difficult to get in, the profit will be high. But since it's also difficult to get out, the stability of the profit may not be that well. So we could say that high entry barriers generally might indicate that we would find high profit industries. And the same goes for low entry barriers, because if we have not a lot of barriers to enter a specific industry, then it indicates that it's easy to get in, and therefore a lot of people would like to get in. So it indicates that the profit might be low. And then depending on, again, whether it's high or low, talking about the exit barriers, we would find the profit and stability to be up for discussion. So it's a mental model for evaluating the attractiveness based upon the different powers that you see up here. Again, potential entrants, high, medium, low, barriers of entry, etc. In the book, you can find lots of examples if you want to, or need to make a very specific analysis of the different powers. There you will find lots of good guidance to that. But this is what it's all about. Okay. Then we get to step number 7, 8, and 9, which is something that I'm not going to talk a lot about, just slightly touch upon it. We have those factors specific for cooperation, which is Lynch's own idea about 4 links analysis. And what you should basically take from this is that the organization that you work in, or who you are, that you can have links to governments and other type of networks. So again, it's all about links, networks, etc. So it's about using your network and take advantage of the network that your company is in, and also take advantage of the network that you yourself have. And that is why it's important also when you study, that you start to have these competences of getting connected to people and get to know each other, get to know each other's competences, and hang on to people that you yourself can bond with, but also to use later on when you get into different organizations, so you can use each other's competences for developing yourself, your career, and also your companies. Good. Step 8, about competitors. It's very common that when we talk about competitors, we will talk about their objectives, what kind of resources do they have, how have they performed before, past, what kind of products and services do they have right now, and what are their strategies. And remember that resources, that includes also their economic resources. It also includes their competences. That means their tangible resources, their intangible resources, and their capabilities. And then when we do an external analysis, our competitors, they are part of our external environment. And therefore, when we do this analysis of our competitors, we will find opportunities and threats based on this analysis, and we can add that to our list of opportunities and threats. And then we have customers, step 9. Here we have customer profiling, we have segmentation, positioning, strategies that we have right now, and what about buying situations, etc. So there are lots of things we can look into. The course here about strategic management is not really digging a lot into customer analysis. We're not digging a lot into competitor analysis. If it were a marketing course, marketing management, then we would have spent a lot of time studying these 2 steps together with lots of other things. But then our focus would have been a lot on customers and strategies for customers. Yes.